My name is Maren Ellis. I'm 36 years old. On the Saturday morning of the 4th of July weekend, I woke up in my mother's house to a silence so complete I could hear the ice maker drop a cube 2 rooms away because my family had driven out of the county without me. For 18 days, they'd all said the same 4 words: don't make any plans. They went quiet in the kitchen when I came in for the salt. Just wait and see, my mother said, and she smiled when she said it. So I waited. I slept in my old bedroom because she asked me to. I woke up to an empty driveway, a cold coffee pot, and a note on the counter about my great-aunt's blood pressure pills. By noon, I was looking at my sister's post, an orchard road, 2 pickup trucks, my whole family sitting on the tailgate with sparklers in their hands, laughing at something just off camera, and underneath it, in that curly font she saves for good news, better without her chain. 406 people had already seen it. Our pastor's wife had left a heart. I didn't comment, I didn't text, I didn't call a single one of them. I just waited because there was one thing about that orchard that not one person in that photograph knew. 2 days later, my phone showed 71 missed calls and 1 voicemail from my mother. That was 11 seconds long and ended in a whisper. Please come home, we didn't know. Welcome back to the channel, where quiet women tell you exactly how they took their lives back. No screaming, no revenge fantasies, just the truth, laid out slow and in order. If stories about family, boundaries, and long overdue reckonings are your thing, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Now let me back all the way up, because you need to know who was standing alone in that kitchen. I'm an independent insurance adjuster in Corbin Falls, Oregon. Population 9,000, 1 stoplight that everybody complains about, and a valley full of orchards that turn white in April and gold in October. I have a 2-room office over the credit union on Fillmore Street. 1 employee, Rosalie, who has worked for me for 5 years and can spot a padded claim from the parking lot. 40-some open files at any given time, a coffee maker that predates my divorce. Here is what I do for a living. I walk into the worst day of a stranger's life, and I write it down accurately. Hail damage, kitchen fires, a barn that came down under 6 inches of wet snow. I photograph it, I measure it, I read the fine print on a policy nobody's read since they signed it, and I tell people the truth about what they're owed. I've had grown men cry at me over a claim number. I've had women hand me their dead husband's file folder with shaking hands. I'm good at it because I don't flinch at a bad number, and because I write everything down. That last part matters. Remember it. 7 years ago, my father died in the orchard rows at Rowan Hill with a pair of pruning shears in his back pocket. Aneurysm. 61 years old. He was between the 8th and 9th row of Gravensteins, and my mother found him because the tractor was still running. My dad was the beam this family sat on. And when a beam goes, somebody has to get under it fast and stay there and keep quiet about how heavy it is. That somebody was me. I became the one who kept it all standing. My great Aunt Dell's medication schedule lived in my phone. My mother's furnace guy, roof guy, and tax preparer all had my number instead of hers. Every insurance renewal in this family crossed my desk. Every claim, every deductible, every hey, can you just look at this? And on the second shelf of my office closet between 2 bankers' boxes of old files sat a gray waterproof field case with a strip of masking tape on the lid, 2 words in black marker. Rowan Hill. 7 years of receipts, invoices, canceled checks, tax statements, and photographs inside. I added to it every few weeks the way some people water a grave. Nobody in my family knew that case existed. By the end of this story, every single one of them would know exactly what was in it, and for one of them, the cost of knowing was more than he could stand to pay. But that July, it just sat on the shelf, fat, patient, and waiting for somebody to finally ask the right question. You would have liked my family if you only ever saw us from the road. My mother, Gail, 63, she can make a paper tablecloth look catered. She ran every holiday like a stage director, who sits where, who carries the ham in, whose good news gets announced between the salad and the main. My sister Delaney, Laney, is 39, office manager at a dental practice, married to Kip, who drives a gravel truck and has the best laugh in the county. Their daughter Junie is 11, all knees and questions, and the only person at those dinners who ever asked me how my week went. and then actually waited for the answer. My brother Wes is 30. He sells farm equipment out on the highway, and he has been one investor away from something enormous since he was 24. Every Sunday we ate at my mother's, and every Sunday there came a moment when something needed doing. A form, a dispute, a phone call to a company with a hold time. And the room would say the same sentence in the same easy voice. Mer'll take care of it. Nobody ever asked me if I wanted to take care of it. You don't ask the water heater how it feels about hot water. I fixed Aunt Dell's Medicare Part D mess. I handled Kip's truck claim after the deer. I did my brother's renter's insurance, my sister's homeowner's dispute, my mother's everything. And last October, for the first time in my adult life, I said no to something. Wes wanted me to co-sign a loan for a diesel dually he could not afford on his best month. I told him no, and then I offered to sit down with him and build a plan for something used. I even printed it out. He looked at me like I'd taken a swing at him. The chill at Sunday dinner lasted a month. Not anger. My mother doesn't do anger. My mother does weather. Nobody raises their voice, the conversation flows perfectly around you, and the gravy boat reaches you last every single time until you learn. I thought that weather had cleared by June. I was wrong about what it had turned into. The whispering started 18 days before the 4th. My mother called me on a Tuesday while I was closing out a hail file for a client in Sublimity. Don't make any plans, sweetheart, she said. I could hear her smiling through the phone. Not for the holiday weekend, promise me. I asked her what was going on. Just wait and see, she said. That Sunday, the whole house had a secret in it. Lainey and my mother went quiet when I came into the kitchen, the way a radio drops out under an overpass. Wes grinned at his plate like a kid with a lighter in his pocket. At one point, Junie came bouncing up to me and said, "Aunt Marin, did you know her?" And my sister's hand landed on her shoulder and steered her toward the pie so fast the kid's braid swung. And I told myself it was a surprise. For me, I know exactly how that sounds now, but you have to understand what those 18 days felt like from the inside. I had spent 7 years being the person who plans things for other people. Nobody had planned a thing for me since my 30th birthday, when my father grilled in a rainstorm and made everybody stand under the carport and sing. So when my family started whispering and smiling and telling me to keep my calendar clear, some little boarded-up room inside my chest cracked a window. Maybe a party, maybe a trip, maybe just a cake with my name written on it in somebody else's handwriting. I read the fine print for a living. I can find the exclusion clause that's going to ruin your year from across a room. But even an adjuster will misread a document when she badly wants it to say something kind. I want to be clear about one thing, because it matters later. I didn't walk into this blind. I asked, twice. The first time, I asked my mother straight out if the family was going up to Rowan Hill for the holiday. Because if we were, I needed to move a commercial inspection and take days off from my own business. She looked me in the face and said, "Stay put, honey, trust me. You're going to want to be right here." The second time, a week out, I asked Lainey if I should prep anything, coolers, groceries, the folding tables, the usual. She said, "Nope, all handled. Just keep the weekend open." So I did what a careful person does. I moved a $40,000 commercial roof inspection to the following Tuesday and apologized to a contractor who did not enjoy it. I gave up my seat at a 2-day adjuster certification in Bend that I'd been looking forward to since February. Non-refundable, by the way, $410. I checked the family group chat for logistics because I am always the logistics. Nothing, quiet as a bank on Sunday. And here's the part that still burns when I say it out loud. That January, 6 months before any of this, I had tried to fix this family with one sheet of paper. I printed a simple cost-sharing plan. Who could contribute what toward the orchard property, everything above board, everything optional, my own share the largest line on the page. I set it on the kitchen table after dinner. My mother cried, like I'd read her diary out loud in church. My sister said, and I'm quoting her, "You're turning this family into a claim." My brother laughed and called me an adjuster in a cardigan. So I folded that one page back into my bag, and I went right on paying for everything myself, quietly, the way I had for 7 years. They called me an adjuster in a cardigan in January. By July, I'd find out what they actually thought I was. The Friday before the 4th, my mother invited me to dinner and asked me to stay the night. "Sleep in your old room," she said. "Big morning tomorrow." She made pot roast, in July, in Oregon. That alone should have set off every alarm I own. The house felt warm in a rehearsed way, like a stage 10 minutes before the curtain. Wes kept checking his phone and smiling at it. Lainey and Kip came by for dessert, and twice I walked into a conversation that stopped so hard I could feel the period at the end of the sentence. And behind the laundry room door I saw a suitcase, navy blue, handle up, wheels out, packed and ready. And my chest did that stupid warm thing again. Luggage, so it was a trip. They'd finally planned something, and all I had to do was show up and let myself be celebrated for once. I remember standing in that hallway with a dish towel in my hands, deciding that I would let them have the fun of surprising me, that I wouldn't peek, wouldn't guess, wouldn't do what I always do and figure it out 3 steps early and ruin it. When Lainey's family left, Junie hugged me at the door about 4 seconds longer than usual, her face pressed into my ribs, and she said, "Bye, Aunt Marin," in a small flat voice that I filed under tired kid. It was not a tired kid. My mother kissed my forehead at the top of the stairs, first time in maybe 6 years, and she said it one more time, softer than all the others. "Don't make any plan." I brushed my teeth in the sink I'd used in high school, got into my childhood bed, and fell asleep listening to my family murmur through the wall, warm as a fool in a snowstorm. I slept beautifully. That's the part I still haven't entirely forgiven myself for. I woke up at 7:20 to a house with no sounds in it. No coffee grinder, no shower, no Wes stomping down the stairs like a horse, just the refrigerator humming to itself, and somewhere in it, the ice maker letting go of a cube. I laid there a full minute telling myself they were hiding, that I'd come down and the lights would flip on, and there'd be balloons and somebody filming my face. I came down. The kitchen was clean and cold. Through the window, the driveway was empty, both trucks gone, gravel tracked with the pattern of a vehicle that left in a hurry. And on the counter, tucked under the sugar bowl, sat one sheet of paper in my mother's round, cheerful handwriting. Dell's pills, white ones with breakfast, the half one at night. Charts on her fridge, recycling goes out Monday. Please water the dahlias, they're fussy in this heat. Back Monday night, thanks on. No apology, no explanation, no destination, no we'll miss you. Not even my name, just on, the word you use for a waitress or a dog or somebody whose name isn't load-bearing. I stood there in my pajamas holding that note, and the room did a slow, quiet tilt, because I finally saw the shape of the whole thing. Don't make any plan. Not because there was a plan for me. Because I was the plan. I was the pill schedule. I was the dahlias. I was the recycling. Staff doesn't get an invitation when the family goes on vacation. Staff gets a list. I called my mother once, straight to voicemail. Her chirpy greeting from 9 years ago, back when my father was alive and could be heard laughing in the background of it. I set the phone face down on the counter next to the note, and I made myself a cup of coffee in that spotless kitchen, and I drank the whole thing standing up while somewhere north of me my family drove up a valley highway with the windows down. By noon I knew exactly where they were, the way you find out most things now, from a screen. It was Lainey's post. I wasn't even looking for it, the app served it to me like a summons. First photo, the orchard road at Rowan Hill, the ruts I know by heart, gold dust hanging in the light. Second, my brother on the tailgate of his truck with a sparkler in each hand, mid-laugh, sunburned and glorious. Third, my mother in her wide straw hat, holding up a red plastic cup, laughing with her entire face, a laugh I had not seen since my father was alive. Fourth, Kip at the fire pit, Junie sitting on the porch rail of the farmhouse, the old cider barn behind them with its doors thrown open and string lights already hung. I know that road. I know that porch rail. I paid for the shingles above it. Rowan Hill, 18 acres and a farmhouse and a barn, 2.5 hours north, my father's orchard, the last thing that man ever built with his hands. And across the bottom of the last frame, in my sister's happy announcement font, better without her chain. 406 views by noon. I stood in my mother's kitchen and I read it 4 times. The way you read a column of figures that keeps landing on a total you don't want. Better without her. I waited for the scream to come up my throat. It didn't. What came instead was worse, or maybe better, a stillness, cold and flat and wide, like a pond icing over in one night. I didn't comment, I didn't post, I didn't text one human being. I put the phone face down. I washed my coffee cup, dried it, and set it in the rack. Then I picked up the hose, walked out to my mother's dahlias. She has 11 of them, she names them, she enters 2 in the county fair every August, and I turned the water on. And I stood there. And after about 20 seconds, I turned the water back off, coiled the hose, and hung it on the hook. Every machine has an off switch. Mine had just been located. And here is what my family did not think about when they drove out of that driveway. They left me alone in town with every account, every policy, every file, every password, and every piece of paper this family had ever handed me and forgotten about. Here's what I did not do that Saturday. I did not call my sister and demand an explanation. I did not type the 14 furious paragraphs my thumbs were begging me to type. I did not cry into the leftovers. Anger is a credit card. It feels like money while you're in the room. It bills you in the dark with interest. I locked my mother's house, drove 11 minutes to my apartment, showered, put on real clothes, and then did the one thing on that note that was actually worth doing. I picked up my great aunt's prescriptions, and I drove out to Dell's little green house on Ledbetter Road. Because here's who else woke up alone that morning. An 84-year-old woman with a bad hip and a mind like a bear trap. They left her behind, too. Too much trouble, apparently. Too many stairs at the farmhouse. Dell opened the door in her good cardigan, looked at my face for about 1 second, and said, "Well, come in and crack some eggs." So the 2 people who got cut from the guest list ate scrambled eggs and toast at her kitchen table off the plates with the blue windmills on them, and neither of us said the word orchard for a solid hour. There was a strange peace in it, sitting across from the only person in my family who has never once handed me a list. If you've ever been the one holding everything together and somehow the last one anybody thinks to invite, tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and stay with me, because what I found on my mother's email account 2 hours later is something my family still doesn't know I saw. Dell was a court reporter for 31 years, which means she sat 6 feet from people lying under oath, 4 days a week, for 3 decades. She can hear a lie coming before it finishes getting its shoes on. She poured me more coffee and told me what she knew, which was almost nothing, and that was the whole point. They told her about the trip on Thursday 2 days out. "It's a lot of walking, Aunt Dell. You'd be miserable," said to a woman who still cleans her own gutters against the direct orders of everyone who loves her. Then she stirred her coffee and said the thing I've thought about nearly every day since. "They took the gate key off my hook." She tapped the spoon on the rim. "Funny thing, nobody's ever once asked who pays for the gate." I looked up. She looked right back, level as a countertop. She had never seen the gray case. She didn't know a single number in it, but old women do arithmetic in their own currency. She'd watched me show up with a chainsaw in February and a checkbook in April for 7 straight years, and she had drawn her own conclusions and filed them away the way teachers and court reporters do, waiting for the person to be ready. Then she said something that made no sense yet. "Your daddy did one smart thing about that orchard before he died." She held her mug in both hands. "You asked me about it when you're ready." I said I was ready right now. She shook her head. "No, honey. You're angry right now. Ready's a different animal. Ready comes after you know what they're actually doing up there." I told her they were drinking out of red cups and lighting sparklers. Dell looked at her kitchen window toward the north for a long, quiet moment. Then she said the second thing I've never been able to forget. "Your mother came by here Thursday with a casserole and her good folder, the green one, the one from the funeral, sitting on the passenger seat." She turned back to me. "Nobody packs paperwork for a picnic. The email account was my job, the way everything eventually became my job. 4 years ago, my mother got locked out of the address she'd used since 2009, the one that every utility, every tax notice, every insurance renewal for Rowan Hill goes to. Say it with me, Marin'll take care of it. So I recovered it, I secured it, and I have paid the orchard's bills out of it ever since, on my own dime, from my own bank account, 4 times a year for 7 years. And here's the thing you should know about my mother. She screenshots everything, every conversation, every text thread, every group chat, and then she emails them to herself so she won't lose them. She has done this since the flip phone era. There are 11,000 emails in that account, and about 900 of them are pictures of her own text messages. Saturday afternoon, at Dell's kitchen table, I logged in to pay the second half property tax notice. I never got to the tax notice. Right there at the top of the inbox, sent Wednesday, sat this. Pruitt & Sons Realty confirming Rowan Hill walk-through Sunday 11:00 a.m. Hollis Pruitt. Everybody in Corbin Falls knows Hollis Pruitt. His face is on the biggest billboard on Route 22, right over the words Pruitt sells it. I sat very still. A realtor, at my father's orchard, on a holiday Sunday at 11 in the morning. With my entire family conveniently gathered in one place, coolers packed, kid entertained, great aunt parked in town, and the one person in this family who reads every document line by line for a living park 2.5 hours south, watering the dahlias. Numbers don't lie, but they'll sit there quietly while you lie to yourself. I had spent 18 days believing that whispering was a party. My family didn't take a vacation. They took a meeting. And whenever that meeting was, they had needed me, specifically surgically me, to not be in the room for it. I scrolled. Beneath the realtor email, forwarded from her own phone to her own inbox on the 11th of June, 41 screenshots of a group chat called Orchard Squad created the second week of April, while I was doing 3 of their tax extensions. I read 3 months of my family planning a weekend without me the way other people plan a wedding. Who's bringing the canopy? Whether Kip's brother could haul the second smoker. My mother telling my sister to pick the week I'm always buried in end-of-quarter claims so she won't push to come along. No. And then, dated the 2nd of May, the message that permanently rearranged something behind my ribs. Junie, 11 years old, texting from her mother's phone, had asked, "Is Aunt Maren coming? She loves the orchard." And my mother's reply, timestamped 9:41 on a Wednesday morning, sitting there in a gray bubble like it cost nothing. "Not this one, baby." She'd read the fine print out loud. That was it. That was my crime, stated plainly in writing by my own mother. Not that I was cruel. Not that I was boring or difficult or unkind. That I would read the fine print out loud, in front of everyone. I read it maybe 10 times. And somewhere around the 6th, the hurt did a strange thing. It went professional. "All right, Mom," I remember thinking, with a calm that honestly scared me a little. "What fine print were you so afraid I'd read?" 2 screenshots later, I found out. Pinned at the top of that chat was an attachment. Rowan Hill Family Plan, V4. I built that spreadsheet 2 winters ago at my mother's kitchen table so she could track the property expenses without calling me every Sunday night. Clean tabs, working formulas, little color-coded categories. She hugged me and called me her clever girl. And there it was, my own work, repurposed to budget the weekend I'd been deleted from. Fuel split 4 ways. Grocery run and 1-line item near the bottom that read, "Happy lunch, Gail." Happy Hollis Prout. They were buying the realtor a sandwich on my spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet was just the appetizer. The chat spelled out the rest in cheerful little bubbles. Saturday night after Junie's down, family meeting. Everybody on the same page before Hollis comes. Sunday 11, walkthrough. He thinks $540 with the barn. The vineyard people want it before harvest season pricing. Wes, in May, deposits due the Friday after the 4th. $75K holds my share of the tap room. Marcus can't hold the slot pass then. My mother in June, "That orchard has never done anything but cost this family money. Your father would want it working for us." And then, posted 11 days before they left, the last brick in the wall. "Don't tell Maren till it's signed. You know how she gets." You know how she gets. I sat at my great-aunt's kitchen table with that phone in my hand, and I understood the entire architecture at once, the way a column of figures suddenly foots. They weren't just having a weekend without me. They were voting on my father's orchard, selling the last thing he ever built. And I wasn't on the ballot. I was on the chore list. I drove home as the light went long and gold across the valley. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pour a drink. I went to the closet in my home office, and I took down the gray case with the masking tape on it, and I set it on my kitchen table the way you'd set down something that could break. And for the first time in 7 years, I opened it and read the whole thing straight through, as a stranger would, as an adjuster would. Property taxes on the Rowan Hill parcel, $4,300 a year, 7 years running. Every receipt filed by quarter, everyone paid from my account. Farm and dwelling policy, $2,240 a year. Auto pay out of Ella's claim services. My name on every declaration page. The well pump and the drain field. The spring the water went brown, $9,400. And me on the phone with the driller at 6 in the morning between 2 hail inspections. The metal roof after the June hail 4 years ago. $6,800, ironic, isn't it? I adjusted 40 of those claims that summer for strangers. Mine, I just paid. The irrigation main and the new pump for the young trees, $3,900. The barn, my father's cider barn, the one my sister hung string lights in for the photograph, was going down at the northeast corner. Sill beam, footing, 2 new posts, $5,100, and I did not tell one living soul I'd done it. And then the rest. Tree work, mowing the rows, the chimney, the plow guy, the blackberry clearing, the gate. Another $7,300, $100 at a time, one autumn after another. At the bottom of the last page, in my own handwriting, in pencil, sat the total I had never once said out loud to anybody. $78,280. That orchard has never done anything but cost this family money, my mother wrote. She was almost right. It cost money. It just never cost her any. I sat there with my hand flat on those pages, and I could hear her voice from 18 days of phone calls, sweet as pie filling. Don't make any plans. I looked at 7 years of my quiet, invisible, unthanked competence lying open on a kitchen table, and I made one. But a plan needs its paperwork, and mine was still missing a document. So the next morning I went back to my great aunt. Sunday morning Dell had the coffee already poured, because old women keep their own calendars. I sat down and I said, "I'm ready now." She nodded like I'd finally turned in a late assignment, and then she told me about the smart thing. 9 years ago, 2 years before he died, my father had a scare, chest pain out in the Rose, an ambulance ride down the valley, a night in the hospital in Salem, and 3 days of lying flat on his back doing the thing men like him never do, thinking about after. When he got home, he did 2 things. He put a new pump in the well. And on a gray Thursday that November, he drove into town to the attorney's office above the pharmacy on 3rd Street, and he put the Rowan Hill property into a trust. Dell went with him. She signed as a witness. She remembers he wore his funeral tie because it was the only one that was ironed. He named a trustee, one trustee, sole authority over the property. Nothing sold, nothing borrowed against, nothing signed without her. Me? He said something to me in the car, Dell told me, hands around her mug. And I'm quoting your father now, so listen. He said, "The one who shows up is the one who ought to hold the keys." I knew. Of course I knew. Of course I knew. I'd signed the acceptance myself at 27 years old, half listening, embarrassed by the fuss, assuming it was housekeeping that would matter someday, in some distant gray-haired future that had nothing to do with me. He meant to tell the family at Thanksgiving, when the moment was right. 22 months later, he was face down between the 8th and 9th row, and there had been no moment. And I folded that piece of paper away with my grief and never said it out loud, because announcing it while my mother wept into his flannel would have looked like a land grab, and because I was too busy becoming this family's load-bearing wall to read my own blueprint. So that's where things stood on that Sunday morning. My family was 2.5 hours north, sitting on a porch, preparing to vote on selling a property they had no legal power to sell. I stood up to leave with my whole spine full of purpose. And Dell said, "Sit down, there's a second half." So I sat, and my great-aunt told me about my mother, the part that never gets told at Sunday dinner. Gail was 22 when her own father's health broke. There were 3 kids, and the other 2 had the good sense to live in California, so for 8 years. 8, my mother cooked, bathed, lifted, managed pills, and missed the entire decade in which a life gets built. Her brother and sister sent Christmas cards with palm trees on them. Nobody paid her. Nobody thanked her. Nobody asked. And the one time she raised the subject of getting some help, her father looked at her, Dell was in the room, and said he wasn't aware daughters had started sending bills. Her daddy thought that's what daughters were for too, Dell said. And she let that sentence sit on the tablecloth between us like a stone she'd been carrying in her apron pocket for 40 years. I asked her why she was telling me. Was I supposed to forgive it? Dell made a sound like a laugh with the humor taken out. "Forgiving's your business, not mine. I'm just showing you the river." She leaned in. "Your mother drowned in that exact water, honey. And instead of draining the thing, she taught her own daughter to swim laps in it and called it being a good girl. That's the oldest recipe there is." Then she patted my hand once, briskly, and added, "But knowing where the flood started won't keep your feet dry." I drove home the long way, past the feed store, past the turnoff to the Orchard Road, and I'll tell you the truth about what all that history did to me. Understanding my mother did not move my next decision by a single inch. It only made my hand steadier when I made it. Sunday night. My kitchen table. The gray case closed at my left elbow. A mug of tea going cold at my right. My laptop open in the middle of it like an altar. 2.5 hours north, if their agenda held, my family had put the kid to bed early and gathered on the farmhouse porch. Everybody on the same page before Hollis comes. Every phone on that porch had my number in it. Any one of them, any minute, for 3 months, could have called me. I checked, out of pure professional habit, when the last one had. 9 days earlier, my mother, it said, "Don't forget Dell's eye appointment Thursday." So no, I did not text my family. I have never once texted them about any of this, and I never will. And if that strikes you as cold, I understand. But go back and read that note on the counter, and then tell me which one of us went cold first. Instead, at 11 minutes to 9, I wrote an email to the office of Prout & Sons Realty. It was 4 lines long. I have written grocery lists with more feeling in them. "Mr. Prout, I am the sole trustee of record of the trust that holds the property at 4888 Rowan Hill Road, parcel number attached along with a copy of the recorded trust certification. The property is not for sale. No listing agreement, purchase agreement, or option will be signed by me. I'd recommend your office verify title before tomorrow's 11 o'clock appointment. Thank you for your time." 'Cause manners are free. I copied myself. I hit send at 8:47 on Sunday night, and that little whoosh sound was the loudest thing that had happened in my apartment all weekend. The invisible daughter died right there, at a clean kitchen table, somewhere between one email and a cup of cold tea. I rinsed the mug, I went to bed, and I slept like a file that finally closed. On the 4th of July, I did something radical. I lived my own life. I picked up Dell at 8:30 and we went to the farmer's market on the square, where she argued about apricots like it was a blood sport and introduced me to 4 separate women as my niece, the one with her own business. We bought too much corn. We got coffee from the truck with the striped awning and sat on the bench in front of the library, and the high school band practiced badly across the street. And my great aunt, who knew exactly what I'd sent the night before because I told her over the apricots, never once asked me if I was sure. That's what being believed in feels like, in case you'd forgotten. Meanwhile, 2.5 hours north, I could picture the morning like I'd catered it myself. My mother wiping down counters no guest would ever look at, setting out the lemon squares she makes for company, angling the good chairs toward the view of the rows, Wes pacing the porch in his lucky shirt, rehearsing numbers about a tap room he had never once run past the only person in the family who does numbers for a living, Laney sweeping the barn floor for maximum listing photo potential, and a man with a billboard smile loading a folder into his Tahoe, whistling, with absolutely no idea that an email had been sitting in his inbox since 8 Tom 47 the night before like a mousetrap in a bread box. At 10:58 on that library bench, I checked the time, turned my ringer off, and set my phone face down on my knee. Dell watched me do it and bit into an apricot. At 11:06, the screen lit up for the first time. I watched it glow through the back of the case, patient as a lighthouse. I didn't touch it. Here's the anatomy of a family emergency, as observed from a library bench in the sunshine. 11,006, Mom. 11,000, Mom. 11,9, Mom. 11:14, Wes. Then Wes. Then Wes again, 4 times in 6 minutes, like a man kicking a vending machine that ate his dollar. 11:31, Laney. 11:33, a voicemail. 11:52, Kip. Kip, my brother-in-law who has never once called me in his life, a man so allergic to the telephone he replies to voicemails with a thumbs-up emoji. By 2 in the afternoon, the screen looked like a slot machine that wouldn't quit paying out. I drove Dell home. I made her lunch. I rehung her screen door because the 4th of July is a fine day for labor. The only messages I opened all day were from the one number I will always answer, Junie texting from her mom's phone, no capitals, no punctuation, pure signal. Aunt Marin, why is everyone yelling? Then, 20 minutes later, the realtor guy left after like 10 minutes he didn't even walk out to the barn. Then, Grandma keeps saying a number and putting her hand over her mouth. And then, at 4:40, the one that told me everything I needed to know about where we were, Mom deleted her post. Not an apology, not a phone call on speaker saying, we're so sorry, come up, we'll wait for you. Deleted the evidence. I put my phone on the charger at 9 o'clock and watched fireworks from my own balcony with my feet on the railing. By midnight, the counter reads 71 missed calls from 5 different numbers, and not one voicemail among them had yet contained the only word that mattered. From what I later pieced together, it took them about 2 hours to figure out who controlled the property. It took them until dark to figure out who'd been paying for it. Tuesday morning, over coffee, I listened to my voicemails the way I go through a claimant's shoebox of receipts, chronologically, without flinching, pencil in hand. Wes, 11:33 a.m., shouting over wind, what did you do? Hollis just walked. He walked, Marin. You blew it up. Call me back right now. No question about whether it was true. Straight to the wound. Laney, 12 have an even size, in her front desk voice, the one she uses to tell people their insurance won't cover it. Hey, so there's been a big misunderstanding, and I think if we all just sit down like adults, and then a pause, and then her real voice dropping off the script, Mom says there are records. Marn, are there records? Just call me. Aunt Patches, 340/40 syrup, poured over gravel, sweetheart, whatever this is. Family works it out. Also, honey, is it true about the taxes? Call your Aunt Patches. And then my mother. 3 voicemails spread across the day like the stages of a fever. The first, brisk and managerial, Marin Elizabeth. Call me this minute. This is a family matter. The second, at dusk, wind gone out of it. You paid the well, and the roof. Why didn't you? And then a long breath, and then the click. And the third, at 11:58 that night, barely above a whisper. The voice of a woman sitting alone on a dark porch while everybody else pretends to be asleep inside. Please come home, we didn't know. I set my pencil down. I looked out my window at the parking lot of my ordinary, self-made little life, and I said out loud to my empty kitchen the only response that voicemail had earned. You knew enough to whisper. 71 calls in a day and a half, from a family that could not dial my number one time in 3 months to say, pack a bag. If there's somebody in your life who only calls when the power goes out, tell me about it below. I read them all. And stay with me, because what I said in my mother's living room 2 nights later is the part they'll be repeating in this family for the next 30 years. They came home Tuesday, a day late, because you can't check out of a vacation angry any faster than you can happy. My brother didn't bother calling first. At 12:40 on Wednesday, he came through the door of my office on Fillmore Street, sunburned and thunderous, straight past Rosalie's desk, and stood over me smelling like campfire and betrayal. You knew, he said. You sat down here and let us drive straight into a wall. I finished the line I was typing. I saved the file. I folded my hands. You planned this for 3 months, I said. I sent 1 email. He went off like a shaken can. I'd humiliated him in front of his business partner. I'd always thought I was better than all of them. This is exactly why nobody wanted you up there. That last one hung in the air between us, and to his credit, he was the one who looked away from it. And then he said the sentence he'd actually driven over to say, the one I'd bet the whole porch agreed on Sunday night. Family land is family land, Marin. I looked at my brother, 30 years old, strong as a barn door, not a bad man, just a man who'd been served his entire life and thought it was the weather. Family land is family land, I repeated. Then it's strange that none of the family ever paid for any of it. His jaw worked. He wanted to hit something, and there was nothing soft enough in my tidy little office, so he put his boot through my wastebasket on the way out and left paper all over the floor. Very fierce. Rosalie leaned in the doorway with her eyes enormous and asked if I was okay. I was down on the carpet picking up crumpled paper, and I realized that I mostly was. But the visit that actually got under my skin came that evening, because my sister brought something I didn't have, a missing piece. Lainey knocked on my door at 7, holding a grocery store pie like a white flag. Mascara ghosted under both eyes. I let her in because I wanted answers more than I wanted distance, and because my sister has never in her life been able to hold a secret with a witness in the room. She started with a caption. It was a stupid joke, she said, staring at my counter instead of at me. I thought you picked work over us again. I was mad. It was ugly, and I'm sorry. Picked work over us again. I asked her, very carefully, what she meant by that, and I watched my sister's face do something complicated. Mom told us in April, Lainey said. She said she asked you first, before any of us. She said you told her the holiday's your worst week for claims, end of quarter, something like that, and that we should just go on without you. She said you insisted, and she said not to bring it up with you, because you already felt guilty enough about it. My kitchen got very quiet. She stood in my driveway, Marin. My sister's voice cracked right down the middle. She said, don't pester your sister about the orchard. You'll just make her feel worse. And there it was, the missing column. To me, my mother had said, don't make any plans. Stay put. Just wait and see. To them, my mother had said, Marin turned us down. Don't mention it to her. 2 stories, airtight, pointed carefully away from each other, like 2 curtains over the same window, and one woman standing between them for 3 months, making absolutely certain that no 2 people in her family ever compared notes. Even the cruelty of that caption had been farmed. My sister aimed it at a woman she genuinely believed had blown off her own family for the 4th time. I'm not excusing her. A laughing emoji is a laughing emoji, and she typed it herself, and 400 people saw it. But standing in my kitchen while my sister cried into her own pie, I finally saw the full blueprint. My mother hadn't just hidden a trip for me. She'd hidden me from my family. Wednesday, the summons started. My mother wanted me at the house to straighten us out as a family, at her table, on her clock, with her pot roast as the anesthesia. Aunt Patris offered to mediate, which is Patris for sit close enough to hear everything. I declined all of it politely, the way I decline a claimant who wants me to write down something that isn't true. And then I sent my first message to my family since that Friday night. 1 text to the regular group chat, the public one, the one without the apple emoji. Thursday, 7 p.m. Mom's living room, all of you, I'll bring the paperwork. That was the entire message. I watched 3 sets of typing dots rise and fall like people bobbing in water. After 6 minutes, the only reply came from Wes. Okay. Power isn't loud. It turns out Power is being the one who names the time and brings the documents. Sound familiar, Mom? I spent Thursday afternoon at the copier like a priest preparing communion, 5 sets, collated, clipped, tabbed, every receipt, every invoice, every canceled check, every tax statement. 7 years of the gray case reproduced in black and white, plus a certified copy of the trust certification, right on top. Rosalie asked if I was okay for the second time in 2 days. Never better, I said, and I meant it, which worried me more than the alternative would have. I stopped at Dell's on my way. She was watching her program, and she muted it, which is how you know a conversation is serious. I asked her to come. I'll take the chair by the lamp, she said. You'll stand. And then she looked at me over her glasses with 31 years of watching people testify. Go get your inheritance, honey, not the land, the other thing. I didn't fully understand her until it was over. I wasn't going there to win. I'd already won at 11,006 on Monday morning on a bench outside the library. I was going there to decide what winning was going to cost. I got to my mother's at 7 exactly, because punctuality is a language and I wanted mine formal. The living room was staged, naturally. My mother has never once hosted an ambush without refreshments, lemon squares on the good plate, coffee in the carafe, lamps turned to their most forgiving setting. My father looked down at all of us from the mantel, holding up a steel head and a smile from some June 20 years gone. Wes stood at the window with his arms crossed, deposit due the next day at 5 o'clock and dying by inches. Lainey and Kip shared the love seat like people at a deposition. Aunt Patris had been disinvited. I made that a condition, and her absence had its own weight in the room like a muted trumpet. Dell took the chair by the lamp with both hands on her cane, magnificent, and my mother sat on the very edge of the sofa in her church cardigan, hair done, face composed, a woman preparing to manage her way through one more weather event. Junia was supposed to be upstairs. I saw her anyway, through the balusters at the top of the staircase, chin on her knees, and I did not tell on her, because there are some educations you don't interrupt. Marin, my mother began, in the voice she uses to send soup back at a restaurant. Before anything else, I want you to know how much we... I raised one hand, gently, and the sentence died of natural causes. I crossed the carpet, I learned to crawl on, and I set the gray case down on the coffee table between the lemon squares and the coasters, square to the edge of the table, the way I'd rehearsed without admitting to myself that I was rehearsing. The room looked at it the way you'd look at a strange dog. My name is the only name on the trust, I said. But that's not the part you don't know yet. My mother said my name the way you'd handle a glass you'd already cracked. I opened the case. I stayed standing, and I did the thing I do better than anyone in that room. I read the record into evidence. Property taxes. Rowan Hill parcel, $4,300 a year. Here are 7 years of county receipts. Note the name on the payment line of every single one. I laid the page flat and turned it toward them. Farm and dwelling policy. $2,240 a year. Auto paid from Ellis Claims Services. That's my business, which means that's my name again. Page. 4 Septembers ago, the well. You all remember the brown water. You made jokes about it at Thanksgiving. $9,400. Here's the driller's invoice, and here's my signature on it at 6:15 in the morning. Page. The metal roof after the hail. $6,800. Page. The barn. I looked up at my sister. The barn you hung the string lights in for that photograph, Lainey. The northeast corner was 2 winters from going down. Sill beam, footing, 2 posts, $5,100. I never told anybody I did it. Page, irrigation, mowing, chimney, plow, the gate. Nobody touched a lemon square. Kip was the first one to stop meeting my eyes, and Kip had the least to be ashamed of in that room, which tells you something about shame and how it always books itself to the wrong account. I turned to the last sheet, the one with 7 years of pencil arithmetic down the margin, and I said the number out loud in that living room for the first time anywhere on earth. $78,280. Then I set a clipped photocopy of the entire file in front of each of them, my mother, Wes, Lainey, Kip, and one for the chair by the lamp, because Dell had earned a program. Mom was right about one thing, I said, and I looked at her, and my voice stayed exactly level, and hers was nowhere to be found. I read the fine print out loud. The clock over the kitchen doorway ticked. Somewhere upstairs, a stair creaked and then went very still. My mother started to rise off the sofa cushion, and I braced myself for the denial, the reframe, the managed weather I'd been forecast under my entire life. That is not what came out of her. What came out of my mother was the truth, and it came out the way water comes through a failed foundation, a seam first, then all at once. She sat back down mid-rise, like her knees had voted against the performance. She looked down at the photocopy in her lap, and she said, I couldn't cover it. The room went so quiet I could hear the coffee cooling. After your father. The pension was a little more than half of what we and I refinanced. And then the card, and then the equity line. Her hand smoothed the pages without reading a word of them. Every month I sat at that kitchen table with your little spreadsheet and moved numbers around like furniture, and there was never... She stopped, started again. Your dad handled it, and then he didn't. And everybody assumed I was fine, and I let them. Because... She looked up. And for one unguarded second, I saw straight past the stage director to the terrified bookkeeping of her own life. Because I could not sit at Thanksgiving and be the poor widow. I could not do it, Marin. Mom, Wes said, you don't have to. Kept going, right over him at me. The bills started coming and your name was already on things, and it was so easy. You never asked for credit, you never even told them what you were doing. A small, terrible laugh. You made it so easy. And then my mother folded her hands in her lap and delivered, in the voice of a woman reciting something she learned, long before she learned to question it, the sentence that explains this entire family. Nobody ever asked me either, you know. All those years with my dad, nobody asked. I thought that's what daughters were for. In the chair by the lamp, Dell closed her eyes like a woman hearing a diagnosis she predicted 20 years ago. And I stood there holding 7 years of paper, understanding my mother completely and finally, the river, the drowning, all of it. And I said quietly, that's the saddest sentence you have ever said to me, Mom, and it still isn't an apology. My sister pulled in a breath, and then came the offer. They pivoted the way families do. No signal, all at once, like starlings. Denial hadn't survived the case file, so they reached for the checkbook. Lainey leaned forward, front desk voice engaged, hand sketching reasonableness in the air. Okay, so here's what actually makes sense. It sells. Hollis says $540, maybe more with the barn. The $78 comes off the top and goes straight to you. Every cent before anybody else sees a dollar. That's fair, Marin. Nobody's asking you to lose anything. Wes came off the window like a man handed one more set. 75 holds my share till tomorrow at 5. Tomorrow, Marin. That tap room did $400,000 in its first year in a town smaller than this one. I'll have Mom paid back in 3 years. You in 2. It's not spending, it's planting. Dad would have understood that. Dad built things. Haxing now, pitching to the room, to the mantle, to the steelhead. And then my mother did the thing I had been braced for since Monday morning. The thing she does better than anyone alive. She crossed the carpet and she sat down on the arm of the sofa right beside me, and she took my hand in both of hers, warm and dry and absolutely certain, and she made her offer. Not money. The other currency. Sign it, sweetheart. Just this once, and everything changes, I promise you. Everything comes through you after this, the money, the decisions, the calendar, out in the open, the way it should have been all along. Every trip, every holiday, you're the first call I make. First, not a note on the counter. Never again. She squeezed my hand. You'd be the head of this family, honey. You practically already are. All you have to do is sign. And there it was, gift-wrapped and glowing and sincerely meant in front of witnesses. Everything I had wanted since I was 29 years old and standing in the rain at a graveside. They were offering me the family I had already been paying for. All I had to do was keep paying. I looked down at my mother's hands wrapped around mine, and I understood at last, all the way down, exactly what the job description was. Promotion, head of the family, chief of staff to my own life, senior vice president of other people's emergencies with a corner office in the house where everybody goes quiet when I walk in. 10 days earlier, I would have signed. That's the part that still frightens me, how close 10 days is. I slid my hand out from between my mother's, gently, the way you take your hand back from a sleeping child. I stood up straight, and I kept my voice at the exact register I used to tell a business owner that their policy lapsed in March. Low, kind, immovable. The orchard is not for sale, I said. Not this fall, not to fund a deposit, and not so nobody has to be the poor widow at Thanksgiving. Dad put it in a trust 2 years before he died, and he wrote one name on it, and that name is staying on it. I looked around the room. It stays open to this entire family. Junie learns to drive the little tractor down those rows next summer, same as I did. That does not change. I picked up the case and closed it. What changes is this. The invisible payments stop on the 31st. Taxes, insurance, repairs, all of it. From here on, Rowan Hill runs on a written agreement. Every share on paper, including mine. Mine's the biggest line on the page, and it always was. I'll draft it for free. It's the last free thing I'm doing for this family. I turned to my brother. The answer on the $75,000 is no. Not out of spite. A dream you can't fund without selling your father's barn isn't a dream yet. It's a bill with a good story attached. When you've got a real plan, bring it to my desk in the daylight and I will go through every number in it with you, line by line, for nothing. And then to my mother, because she was still looking up at me from the arm of the sofa with the deal dying in her eyes, I don't want to run this family, Mom. I never did. I wanted to be in it. Those are different things, and it cost me $78,000 to learn the difference. I put the case under my arm. I'll teach anybody in this room how to read the file. I'll carry nobody. I'm your daughter. I was never your staff. Behind me, Wes kicked the leg of the coffee table hard enough to jump the carafe. Then it's gone, he said, way too loud for that room, the tap room. Tomorrow, gone, and that's on you. He pointed at me the way you point at a car wreck. You know what you are? You're the reason this family's done, Dad would be. And he stopped himself right at the edge of the one sentence none of us ever finished and grabbed his jacket instead. The door didn't slam so much as detonate. The pictures on the wall did a little shiver, and the deadline died right there in the echo. And my mother? This is the bill. This is what it actually cost. Write it down. My mother looked at that door, and then she looked at me. And she went after neither of us. She sat on the arm of that sofa with her hands in her lap and chose silence one more time, exactly the way she'd chosen it all summer. That was my payment in full. I felt it clear the account. Lainey stood, collected Kip with a glance, and said, I'll call you, in a voice that meant someday, maybe, thinner. And then, small feet on the stairs. Junie, in her sleep shirt, went right past her mother's outstretched hand, straight across the carpet, and wrapped her arms around my ribs, fierce as a seatbelt. She tipped her chin up and whispered, Aunt Dell told me you'd stand up. She said, watch. I looked over the top of that kid's head at my great-aunt, who was studying the ceiling with the total innocence of a career court reporter. I hugged my niece. I said goodnight to the room in general. And I walked out the front door of the house I grew up in, lighter and poorer than I had ever been in my life, both at the same time, having just traded the family I'd been buying for the woman I'd been burying. The July night smelled like cut grass and hot asphalt cooling down. Relief and grief will share a seat if you let them. Mine rode home together with the windows down. I'd love to tell you the phone rang the next morning full of apologies. It didn't. It never does. Wes went silent. No calls. No Sunday dinners. A mutual friend reported that he'd picked up weekend shifts and was telling people his sister chose a pile of dead apple trees over her own brother. The taproom slot went to somebody in Albany. Lainey texted on holidays, polite as a greeting card. And then in October she sent me 4 photos of Junie's science fair project with no caption at all, which, for my sister, is practically a sonnet. Aunt Patras changed sides 5 times, depending on the audience. The town talked, and then found fresher weather, and then on a gray Tuesday in November, the bell over my office door rang. And my mother walked in. No casserole, no speech, just a plastic grocery sack full of unopened envelopes. She stood at Rosalie's counter like a first-time client, and she said, "Teach me the file." So I did. We started with how to read a tax statement. She cried once, quietly, over the equity line balance, and I handed her a tissue and a highlighter in that order, because love in my family was finally learning to speak in document. She took a part-time job at the fabric store on the square, her idea, not mine. And in December, she put a check for $200 on my desk. First payment of a plan she invented herself, with a schedule she wrote out longhand on notebook paper. Against $78,000, it was a raindrop in a quarry, and we both knew it. I deposited it anyway. The point of that check was never the amount. Junie started coming by on Fridays after school to do what she calls receipt math. Small, true things. It turns out that's what's left standing when the performance closes. And small, true things, unlike pot roast and promises, compound. This 4th of July, 1 year, almost to the hour, after I woke up in that silent house, I woke up at Rowan Hill. First one up, coffee in my father's old mug, bare feet on the porch boards I paid to replace, standing on them like they were mine, because they are. The rows do this thing in the early morning where the fog lies down between them and the whole orchard looks like it's floating. Dell was out on the porch by 8, wrapped in a quilt, supervising the horizon. Junie spent the entire morning learning to drive the little tractor down row 8, badly and magnificently, while my sister, who came up Friday awkward and trying, which counts for more than people think, filmed every attempt and posted exactly none of them. My mother arrived at noon, invited, with a potato salad and without commentary. She sat in a lawn chair like a guest, because that's what she was, and it turns out guests can be absolutely delightful. There's a cost-sharing agreement in the kitchen drawer with 4 signatures on it. Everybody share on paper in daylight. Nobody whispers at Rowan Hill anymore. The whole architecture of whispering has been condemned. Wes didn't come. His name is on the agreement anyway. His share marked paid by trustee 1 more year. Because the door isn't locked to my brother. It just has visiting hours now. Like every honest door does. Late in the afternoon, a little rain came through, the way it does in the valley even in July, and I stood out under the barn overhang, flipping burgers in the spitting wet, exactly the way my father used to, and Dell watched me do it and smiled at something a long way off. They told me, 18 days running, don't make any plans. So I made one? If you keep one line from this whole story, keep this one. Being needed is not the same thing as being loved. They can look identical from the inside for years, and the day a woman finally learns to tell them apart is the day she stops being furniture in other people's houses and starts being the author of her own. That's my story. 1 note under a sugar bowl, 1 gray case with masking tape on the lid, 71 missed calls, and 1 plan I finally made for myself. If any of that sounded like a ledger you've been keeping quietly for people who have never once asked what it costs you, take this as your sign. Bring it into the daylight, kindly, completely, and let the people who love you prove it with something more than a guest list. If you know a woman who needs to hear this tonight, send it to her. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done standing in that living room? I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you in the next story.